Hello. Today I'm going to discuss the ever-riveting comma. Now I know many of you are rolling your eyes right now, and I feel your pain. The comma is confusing. There are so many rules, but I'm hoping today my presentation will help you a little bit to know how and when to use the comma. Now, the caveat is I'm not going to be able to go through every single way you can use the comma, but I'm going to go through some of the biggies so you have a better idea for your next assignment. So before we begin understanding and explaining and learning about the comma, it's best if you kind of have a better idea of how a sentence is created, some of the components. Obviously, I'm sure most of you know that every sentence must have a subject. These are some sample subjects that could be part of a sentence. Also, sentences must have a predicate, and the predicate basically tells the reader what the subject is doing. So, for example, my mom is a subject, and the predicate would be likes to boss me around. And I'm sure many of you can attest that this is correct. The dog is the subject. Barks would be the predicate. The wall is the subject. Looks ugly would be the predicate. And so on and so forth. However, things get a little more complicated when you get conjunctions involved. Now, I'm sure many of you know that Schoolhouse Rock, conjunction, junction, what's your function? And basically, the fanboys, these are coordinating conjunctions, are used to coordinate, hook up phrases, words, clauses, and sentences. And the coordinating conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Note, they're all shorter, and note that if you remember the word fanboys, you'll remember, or have an easier time remembering, what the conjunctions are. And remember, coordinating conjunctions coordinate two equal parts, whether they're coordinate subjects, coordinate adjectives, well, actually, not coordinate adjectives, that's something else, but coordinate predicates or coordinate independent clauses. Subordinate conjunctions, on the other hand, are a little different than coordinate conjunctions. If you think of a scale, if you have two parts for a coordinate conjunction that's connecting the two parts, it's kind of like evenly weighted, but a subordinate conjunction is a little different in that the subordinate conjunction that begins a subordinate clause is subordinate to the main clause, sort of like a subordinate under a boss. The boss is the main independent clause, and the subordinate helps the boss. So here's some sample subordinating conjunctions. Although, because, until, since, after, and before. There are many more than this, though. And so if you're concerned or confused about how a particular word is operating with a clause, Google that word, and you should know the part of speech that word is. So now we're going to review and introduce finally the comma. Yay! So here are some ways that you can use the comma. First, remember the coordinate conjunction connecting two equal parts. You use the comma to connect two complete sentences together, connected with a coordinating conjunction. Remember those fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. You can use those words to connect two complete sentences. But if you do that, you need to use a comma. So here are a couple of samples. My mother is a subject, wants me to do my homework. That's a complete sentence, right? I, as the subject, am going to a party. I am going to a party is also a complete sentence. You want to connect the two together, and you use the word but, so if you do that, you need to add a comma. I is the subject, run cross country at school, a complete independent clause. My brother is the subject, plays tennis, is the predicate. You have two independent clauses, so you need to have a comma and a coordinating conjunction to connect the two. Here's some caveats to that, though. First, You do not want to add a comma to a compound subject or a compound predicate. What do I mean by that? First, here's a compound subject. My mother and my father. So you have two subjects there. You don't want to put a comma after mother because both of those subjects are sharing the predicate, want me to do my homework. You do need to add a comma but to the next sentence because you're connecting another independent clause to this independent clause. But I'm going to a party. Here's another example. My mother and my father, compound subjects, want me to do my homework. And then you have two prepositional phrases connected to the predicate. Do you put a comma after party? No, because both prepositional phrases are describing the predicate. I am going to a party and to a restaurant. However, because you're connecting this independent clause to another independent clause, my mother and my father want me to do my homework, you do need to add the comma and the but. Basically, what I want you guys to know is you don't add a comma with every single coordinate conjunction. You got to think about how that coordinate conjunction is working in the sentence. All right? Here are two more examples. Compound subject, my boyfriend and I. Compound predicate. And then there's another compound subject, in the second one. My brother and his friends. You don't put a comma all over the place in this sentence. You only need it to connect the two independent clauses. Then we have items in a series. Now, many of you connect the items in a series, but leave out the comma after the final item before the coordinate conjunction. Here's the sample. My mother wants me to do my homework, comma, clean my room, no comma, and make my bed. That is often done in journal articles and magazine articles. And one of the reasons why possibly they do this is to save space and also save money. Because you think about how much space the commas take up. You can save a little bit of money by taking it out. And generally, it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence too often. In academia, though, you do need to add the comma because we don't need to save space or save money. So we add that comma in there. It's called the Oxford comma, and it actually, sometimes it does change the meaning of the sentence when you take it out. For example, Jim lives with his wife, a teacher and a doctor. Jim has one wife, and he just lives with her. The wife is both a teacher and the doctor. If you put that comma in there, it actually states that he lives with three people. He lives with his wife, he lives with a teacher, and a doctor. So here, leaving out the comma actually changes the entire meaning of the sentence. So to make your writing clear and error-free, you need to add that Oxford comma, the last comma in the series before the coordinating conjunction. You also want to add a comma after a subordinate clause. So remember we were talking about subordinate conjunctions earlier, and these conjunctions connect one part that is subordinate to the second part. If you start with a subordinate clause, you want to add a comma after that clause. Here's a sample. This is an independent clause. My mother, subject, wants me to do my homework, predicate. I, subject, am going to a party, predicate. But let's say you want the first part to be subordinate to the second part. What would you add? You could add although. Although my mother wants me to do my homework, comma, I'm going to a party. This is kind of tricky to figure out what is subordinate and what is a conjunction, an independent clause. Well, here, one way you could do it is if you read the sentence out loud to yourself. Although my mother wants me to do my homework, do you see how that sounds incomplete? It's because you added although in there. My mother wants me to do my homework. That's an independent clause. But now you add although there, it makes it dependent to another clause, the independent clause that follows. Because of that, you want to add a comma. But what if you end the sentence with a subordinate clause? Do you still need a comma? So here, let's look at that sentence again, but we're going to switch it around so the subordinate clause ends the sentence. I'm going to a party. That's an independent clause. My mother wants me to do my homework. That's another independent clause. But now you are connecting the two with the word although. Although is not coordinate conjunction, it's actually a subordinate conjunction. So you are connecting the two clauses together with a clause that is subordinate to the independent clause. I'm going to a party. On the other hand, a coordinating conjunction coordinates. So remember the scale again. When you have two sections, you are keeping them the same. They're the same weight. But a subordinate conjunction shows that one part is heavier, the independent clause, and the subordinate clause has less weight. And so depending on its location in the sentence, at the beginning you need a comma, at the end you do not. Another way you can use the comma is when you have an introductory phrase before the main clause. Here's an example. Instead of cleaning my room, I'm going to a party. What's the subject? I. What's the predicate? Am going to a party. So you want to put a comma after the first part of the sentence before the subject. Another example would be, in addition, my brother plays tennis. Put a comma after the introductory phrase before the subject. My brother plays tennis. Now you can also use a comma to separate non-essential phrases in a sentence. And this can be a little tricky. One way I figure this out is if I take out a portion of that sentence, does it still hold the same meaning? Bob lives next door to me. Bob, a local dentist, lives next door to me. Do you need a local dentist to help you understand the sentence? No. Bob lives next door to me. But the information is interesting. Bob, a local dentist, lives next door to me. Here's another example. English is fun, and it is. Learning about the comma, on the other hand, is boring. Do you need, on the other hand, to understand the sentence? No. Learning about the comma is boring. However, if you add, on the other hand, to the sentence, it still makes sense, but you don't need it. So just go ahead and offset that with commas as well. But here are some things that you need to be careful of. Sometimes these clauses are essential to the meaning of the sentence. For example, these sentences generally have the word that or who. So what it does is that these are essential to the sentence because it's pointing to a particular person or thing. So you need to have it within the sentence, so you don't want to use commas. The woman who has brown hair is my mother. Which woman is your mother? Oh, the woman who has brown hair. That's essential, so you don't want to use commas. The chips that have extra salt are tasty. Which ones? Which ones are tasty? Oh, the ones with extra salt. Don't use commas. Another way to use the comma is between coordinate, basically similar adjectives. The adjectives carry the same weight with each other. She is a beautiful baby. She is a healthy baby. Both are equal, right? So she is a beautiful, healthy baby. You can also use the commas, or you should use the comma, between cities and states and months with days and years. And here are two examples. We are from Atlanta, Georgia. We moved there on June 5th, 2014. Also, you can use a comma to introduce a quotation. Sandy says, I'm hungry. When is dinner? What a way to live, said my neighbor. Now, there are two situations that I want you to be wary of when you use this comma. The main one is, and I know many of you know this, the comma splice. Do not create a comma splice. Here's an example. Andy plays football, one independent clause. He doesn't like basketball, another independent clause. You can't connect these two independent clauses with a comma. That's called a comma splice. A comma doesn't work to connect two sentences together on its own. It needs either a coordinate conjunction, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, a subordinate conjunction, Although Andy plays football, comma, he doesn't like basketball. Or you can use a semicolon to connect two sentences. And I like to think of the semicolon working like a comma with the word and. All right? But you can't use just a comma. And I know I discussed this earlier, but don't split up compound subjects or compound predicates. For example, Andy saw Julie at church, comma, and remembered he knew her from school. Remembered he knew her from school is sharing the subject Andy. So you don't want to split the sentence in this way because you're splitting apart the subject from the compound predicate. Take out that comma. Here's another example. This is a compound subject. The beautiful autumn mornings, comma, and the cool weather are two reasons why I love fall. You don't need the comma after mornings because both of those subjects, the beautiful autumn mornings, the cool weather, are sharing the predicate are two reasons why I love fall. So I want to leave you with this. Yes, there are many, many rules, and I just went through a few of them just now, but you will get the handle of it. You don't need to remember all the rules, the technical bearings, because once you start practicing and once you proofread, you'll be able to figure out where the comma goes naturally, sort of like driving. In the beginning, there are so many rules, but after you drive for a while, it becomes second nature. It's the same with writing. The more you practice, the easier the comma will be for you. And also, don't stress. As always, in most of your classes, content is more important than the comma. Content is critical. Mechanics are helpful because it helps the reader understand what you're trying to say, and it just makes your writing seem neater and cleaner, but the content is key. I hope all of you enjoyed my presentation today. I enjoyed giving it to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.